Blessings in Jesus' name. So, obviously some of the strategies of the wicked are to do evil against you, but portray to other people around you that you brought it on yourself, or a degree of it was, a result of your decision, but they knowing what your decision would be in a given situation, and sometimes try to manipulate the course of your moves, because they would know what you would choose in a given situation, so they'll try to facilitate or sort of lead your decision-making process by the environmental stimulus, what's happening in the environment. Well, often also they can sort of reprimand you in a way that appears caring. It appears like they've got your best interest at heart, but actually they're trying to undo you and hinder and thwart you, and really show other people that what you're doing is socially unacceptable. So how do they go about doing that if they're going to roar and shout and be antisocial in their conduct? So they have to appear composed while they're telling you what you're doing is wrong. So they kind of like, I've heard it before, it's kind of like, wait till the notification is finished. Why are you doing this? Oh, don't do this. You should know, you're 39 years of age, you should know that you shouldn't be doing this. What is wrong with you? What got into you? Why are you behaving in this manner? Oh, come on. You should know better than this. We can't have this in society. We can't have this. This is unacceptable. So, sort of civilly behaving in a criminal manner. So removing your constitutional rights, civilly appearing like the one who's composed and most rational. So the things of the world might even appear rational while they're effectively standing between you and your rights for no good reason other than they don't agree with what you're speaking. But they can make you look like an oddity because of the previous harms they've brought against you. So evil has to do evil out of evil, because they've no platform in the truth. So they have to sort of try to manipulate the course of your behaviour so that they can further manipulate the course of your behaviour. Or they try to manipulate your responses so that they can further manipulate the environment around you. So, example, imprisonments, removal of your rights like bans, all these things which are blatantly unlawful. They know that there's an administrative delay in assessing whether they're lawful or not, and they try to harness that administrative delay in order to hinder your movements. Because while something's gone into the system, into the process, they know that they can call the guards to hinder your movements if you don't comply immediately, which is wrong, because something should be established by due course of law before any hindrances are put in place. But they've sort of turned things upside down in that they come between you and your rights whilst something is on appeal, or they may even know there's no way this is going to wash, we can't get through the system. Like, all these constitutional rights are stacked in its favour. This won't wash. If we bring this to the highest court, it's just going to collapse. There's no way we can do this. So what they'll do is they'll just try to keep kicking it down the road. Again and again, it's just a way of delaying you or hindering your movements in that time frame. So within that period, they're trying to hinder your movements. They're utilising the delay in administration to hinder you. Like, an appeal would take X amount of time, or we're going to kick this down the road, there's an adjournment because so-and-so was absent, or something. So they use that, or if they've got their friends in the court, another example of them manipulating, if they've got their friends in the court and they don't want their friend to get in trouble, the guard is sick that day, So they'll manipulate the administrative protocols of the court proceedings, the organisation within court proceedings, to get their friends off, or to further hinder the movements of people who might expose the corruption they're involved in. And so they use the courts as a delay. That's all they use the courts for, a delay. So they would try to civilly delay you, civilly behave in a criminal manner. And the criminality comes when initially they misrepresent the Constitution in their legislature. That's where the criminality comes. That's where the high treason is committed. But even in that, because there's it has to go through. The reality is, if they find something unconstitutional in the legislature, there's an expectation placed upon the person who's in that office to know the Constitution so that they never legislate for something unconstitutional, such that and the appearance of an unconstitutional legislature should immediately lead to the reprimand of the person who brought that legislature into place. It shouldn't be the case where they're saying, oh, we simply have to change it. There should be a reprimand. Otherwise somebody could bring all manner of awry or wayward sorts of legislature into effect so that they can implement criminality for a time period where it was going to take X amount of time to expose that this legislature was unconstitutional. So obviously they're trying to manipulate, and it's the utilisation of time delays in administration, where actually there's a real expectation upon them to never manifest right or bring into effect unconstitutional legislatures, which a first year in law school could blatantly uncover. So if the highest in the high courts are basically inept or incapable, that would be something very unusual given the high standard of education that they have to achieve in order to attain that office. I mean, if a first year in college can see, is they're blatantly behaving unconstitutionally here, this can't be accepted of them. It might be expected of them, but it can't be accepted of them, and therefore shouldn't be expected of them. So at this current time, the corruption is so prevalent that people would actually expect it, and there's sort of an irreverence or a lethargy or an apathy in dealing with these matters, because people say, oh sure, look, it's all corrupt now, as though we should just kind of lie down and accept that. As a people, we have a constitution. The constitution, if it's implemented, is one of the best constitutions in the world. It preserves freedom of expression. That's why people come to Ireland, to avail of these freedoms. If Irish people who are outspoken, who would speak out against pro-abortion legislature or same-sex marriage, or they have a right to do that, even if somebody would say, I'm offended by that. You can be offended without having your rights encroached upon. But there's a difference between offended and an offence. An offence is one thing, being offended is another. The only way somebody can commit an offence by speaking or through media is if they bring forth obscene material. And obscenity has a very specific definition in law. Lewd, salacious, pornographic material, or that of an overly graphic nature in imagery, perhaps, would be considered obscene, but it's generally of a sexual nature. So you might see people around holding graphic imagery of an abortion happening. It's like I saw today, Granddads Against Racism, and they all had lovely hats on. Obviously, sometimes they're bringing it to expose this and affect change, and other times they're just bringing it to promote it and bring it into the psyche of the public. Because I certainly wasn't thinking about racism until I saw the Granddads with the funny hats. And as soon as I saw the Granddads with the funny hats today, I knew they were holding a sign with Granddads Against Racism, because I saw the sign last day, even though I didn't see it today. So it became, by association, just seeing those Granddads standing there, racism came to my mind. So I wouldn't have been thinking about racism previous to seeing the Granddads there. And it's likely that either would the children. So there are many ways of abusing your ability to have freedom of expression, but you can see that those who would implement it to ill effect aren't hindered in so doing, even though the Constitution says that the education of public opinion is of such grave import to the education of the peoples that we should be very careful about what we put out. Well, if you can bring something to referendum and people to vote on it, it absolutely must be allowed to be spoken about in public. Otherwise, how would they campaign to bring it through in the first place? So to retrospectively say you can't now any longer talk about that is an attempt to remove democracy from democracy, in effect. So you're saying you can't effectively have your democracy, but you can theoretically. But once we bring something into effect, you can no longer discuss it. How is that a democracy then? If something's brought into law, you absolutely have the right to challenge it. Otherwise, where would your democracy be? So if they claim to have a democracy, but they're actually operating a dictatorship, once the facade of democracy has been gone through, and the motions of democracy with the voting and the polls and all of that, they say, well, you had your vote. Okay, I had my vote, but I could have another vote. We could bring a referendum again on the same topic. Why are you saying that we can't? Are you now removing democracy? And even if something has been voted for or against, it doesn't immediately remove the right to discuss it in public forum. And if you have a freedom to discuss it in public forum, you have a freedom to present it by any means. So that means any form of media, whether it's visual, audio, banners, dance, song, any form. And so if you have the right to vote on a subject, whether it's same-sex marriage, whether it's homosexuality in general, you can discuss these matters in public, and you don't have to agree with them to discuss them. That would be preposterous. So whilst you can't incite violence against any group, and you shouldn't, and I agree with that, you still have the right to say, I don't agree with that group, and give the reasons why, so long as they're not obscene. And that's really where our freedom of expression is in Ireland. And that's why people come here, to avail of that freedom of expression. So if they're now going to try to civilly remove that in effect, what I mean by that is, they know they can't do it through the jurisdiction of the criminal law, the criminal courts. So what they're trying to do in effect is give the power to the member of An Garda Síochána to decide whether an offence has been committed, such that the guard would leave his jurisdiction and enter into a civil court. So they're saying, oh, we can't do you through the criminal court, so we'll do you through the civil court, and in a roundabout way through the criminal court, because if you fail to do what we tell you to do in the civil court whilst we're out of jurisdiction, then we'll punish you in the criminal court for having failed to obey a ban that in its composition and how it came about was blatantly unlawful, even to a first year at college or anybody who's read the Constitution. So why are our High Court judges not implementing what they know to be lawful? Why are they failing to test the constitutionality of Section 115 and 117 of the Criminal Justice Act 2006 when they've said they would? It's been submitted to court. They said, we will test these things. And then they failed to do it, even though it was in the schedule of the court. So now they're failing to do their job, but people are accepting it because they have the facade of having gone through the motions. And all of it will be in the media at the start. This man's terrible, he's antisocial, he's talking about abortion, he's talking about same-sex marriage. It's absolutely terrible, it's overly aggressive. These subjects shouldn't be talking about. They call him names and try and pin horrible names to him and put it in the newspapers. And then suddenly no more said about it when it's in the court. And it's not in the newspapers thereafter. And nobody's told about it, not even me, though my name has been used in this case. And then they say, oh right, so I dismiss my counsel because they're not acting as my counsel. And then what happens? They say, oh, you can't dismiss us. And then suddenly I can, and I've got to find somebody to represent me in a case, and it's only in December. So between now and then, go find somebody to catch up on the case and deal with it in the interim. Or deal with it yourself. Or if you don't show up, we can deal with it in your absence. They've been dealing with it in my absence from the start. Why would they start taking my presence seriously? So they're like a law unto themselves, but let the Lord of heaven rebuke them. The Bible says that all powers are instituted on the earth by God Most High. Even the Irish Constitution submits, in the name of the Most Holy Trinity, from and to whom as our final end all actions both of men and states must be referred. We the people of Eire, humbly acknowledging our divine Lord Jesus Christ, who sustained our fathers through centuries of trial. So what's happening? Presumption of innocence they're foregoing presumption of innocence, they're foregoing impartiality, they're foregoing jurisdiction. When they say a guard can effectively approach a member of the public on the street play judge, jury and executioner, forego due process of law, a presumption of innocence, and all of the basic fundamental precepts that have ordered Western society from the get-go, which come from the Bible, are enshrined in it, and have been responsible for the integrity and perpetuating or continuing true social order in Western society, and relative peace, so that people can function well enough without being skewered with a sword or whatever it is, and just shot in public, or this relative peace that we now have is as a result of the apprehension of doing time in jail. It's a result of the apprehension that they might actually be reprimanded for evil behaviour. Now, if our members of Garda Síochána are ignoring this, if they're ignoring their station and submitting to their superiors instead of the Constitution, we've got a serious problem in the dynamic and in the order of society. And it's from the government, who are failing to implement the Constitution. You see, the Constitution of Ireland, again, is one of the best in the world if it's adhered to. But they want to give you the impression that it is inadequate, so that they can usher in an inadequate form or a lesser form of rule, calling it the New World Order. And what will they do? Suddenly they start building your houses. Suddenly they start providing what they should have been providing all along. And they say, oh, but it's this new system that has afforded us this. It wasn't there before. When actually, if they apply the system that is now extant, that exists now and is in existence, if they did actually obey their office and comply with it, then they would have a good system. And all that they're going to profess was brought about by the new system. So it's like, if I don't do my job, maybe I can say my job isn't adequate, my office isn't adequate, if I don't apply it properly. This doesn't afford me the ability to provide what you need, this office. Then one might rationally say, well, then the office should be changed. And that's what they want you to do. They want you to believe that the office has to be changed, that the government has to be changed, that the infrastructure has to be changed in order for your basic human needs to be met adequately, sufficiently, and even with a degree of prosperity in it. And so, or at least a perceived prosperity in the physical. So this absence of actually doing their job right, it's not for no reason. They're orchestrating a collapse so that they can appear like the hero when they bring in the New World Order. They do it, actually, it's a boom and bust system. What they do is they say, oh, things are working really well, oh, now they're not working, like the Celtic Tiger, because it's the attempt to take the chips away from you, to render you less than a slave, because now you're in debt. And they're telling us, we're in such debt that we'll never be able to pay it back. Never? Even a slave has the ability to pay back the debt they're in. But if we never have an ability to pay it back, doesn't that render us less than a slave? Never having the ability to have a say ever again in how the country's run? Because the financiers that got us into the problem are still being upheld as the solution to it. So you've basically submitted to a financial system that has usurped the power over the infrastructure, over the Constitution, by way of making you financially incapable of buying yourself out of the debt they led you into. But they still claim those people as the heroes. Oh, Europe are great. Look, they gave us a new key here to enjoy when it's a sunny day. Oh, yay, Europe. And they don't delay putting up the signs that tell you who put that there. What do you think that's about? Why do you think they have a sign saying, we did this for you, hail us? Think that we're the solution to your problems. Well, your own government didn't do it. You see all the dynamics that they're trying to create? And they're simplistically presented. Oh, they're the solution. And so they know they can't directly take on the Constitution in the High Courts or come in by the blade. People might get suspicious. So what they do is they come in through the municipality. They come in through the local government. They take over the country through the bureaucrats drinking the tea and the coffee in the housing department, in this department, in the little departments, because they compartmentalise all the different sections and systems so that they don't appear to be working together to corrupt the system. Oh no, you have to go to that department. Oh no, you'll have to go to that department. Oh no, sorry, you have to do that in the social welfare. Oh no, sorry, you have to go to the housing department to do that. Oh no, sorry, you have to go to the community welfare officer to do that. Oh no, sorry, you have to go to this officer to do that. So it has the appearance as though these guys aren't drinking tea in the staff room together and sitting in the Freemasons Lodge together, orchestrating the collapse of society and manipulating people from behind the screen. But in reality, it's an orchestrated collapse. It's a new world order land grab, so that they're bringing these policies. Somebody came up to me from a county council in Waterford one day and said, look, it's a policy from the EU. You have to do you have to do. I said, I don't have to do any of that. I'm a man of the land. I'm an Irish man. I submit to the Constitution. I do anything that Europe says. Why would I ever have to do anything Europe tells me to do? Is this Ireland, or do we just have a flag? So what's the point? Is it Ireland? Or is the Constitution just like the Bible, stick it in a nice case? In the nice room that people rarely visit? The High Court of Ireland are not implementing the Constitution of this land. They're breaking the law in so doing. They've submitted that they must test Section 115 and 117 of the Criminal Justice Act, which would see them test 113 and 114. Otherwise, they wouldn't comprehensively test it. Section 115 and 117. So we're seeing that this is an absolute failing of the High Court. It's an absolute failing of the High Court to implement properly what they should be implementing, because they are a failing government. That's a demonic manifestation. So the point landed. The High Court of Ireland are not implementing the laws as they should. Let them be rebuked in Jesus' name, because He's the King of Heaven. Amen. They have to submit to and test what they said they would test, and that's Section 115 and 117 of the Criminal Justice Act. You will find that on Garda Síochána are out of order when they forego presumption of innocence and choose to be one party over another, and actually go into the civil court where they've no jurisdiction, and they'll tell you that themselves on their beat on the street as they're walking throughout their daily walk on their job, that they don't have jurisdiction in civil matters. So how's a high-ranking officer prosecuting on behalf of somebody they select to represent? Superintendent or above? He can't go into the civil court. He shouldn't be in there in any aptitude, unless he's got the uniform off and it's his own personal case. So what's he doing prosecuting people in there on behalf of somebody he just so chooses to prosecute on behalf of? Foregoing due process of law, presumption of innocence, and impartiality and jurisdiction. He shouldn't be ever in the civil court. So let's see the Irish Constitution adhered to. Let's see the High Court do their jobs properly and in accordance with the Constitution and the office that they're paid to hold. Blessings. Jesus is Lord.